All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are going to review chapter 12 again for the message on October the 2nd. I always get confused. Yeah, the 2nd, October 2nd. And Mark 12, verses 13 to 17, which is Jesus talking about the temple tax. And and it says, so if you want to watch last week's episode, then you can do that, and that'll give you a little bit more about N.T. Wright's take on this paragraph in this section. And I want to explore a few more commentaries today in regards to that. So again, let me read Mark 12, 13, 17, and then we'll jump in. So Mark writes, then they sent to him some Pharisees and some Herodians to trap him in what he said. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with truth. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you putting me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me see it." And they brought one. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" And they answered, "The emperor's." Jesus said to them, "Give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were utterly amazed at him. All right. So, just a quick understanding of who it is that is talking to Jesus in this moment. So they, and that's going to be the religious authorities. They send Pharisees and Herodians. Pharisees and Herodians are vastly different groups of people. So Pharisees are folks who are, let's see, get to the right one here. So Pharisees are ardent nationalists who nurtured the hope that God would send a Messiah to defeat the foreign powers and expel them from the land. Okay, so they're Jewish, and they were zealous for God, and they were ardent nationalists, meaning they were all about the nation of Israel. And they nurtured the hope that God would send a Messiah that would defeat foreign powers and expel them from the land. So basically restore the promised land the way that it was supposed to be, the way that it was initially set up. So kick out all the Romans, all the Gentiles, all that kind of thing. So that's the Pharisees. The Herodians, however, are collaborators with Rome. They were not an official political or religious party. It's a loose term that designated a range of Jewish people who were attached to Herod's court. So Herod being, in this particular case, Herod Antipas, but would trace their allegiance back to Herod the Great, who took over in 6 BC in the land. Again, at the appointment of Caesar to the land. So they are collaborators with Rome. They are sympathetic to Roman interests, because that helps them stay in power locally and stay alive globally. So let's see. So that's the Pharisees and the Herodians. So they come to trap him. They come to catch Jesus in his words. They try to catch him in an off moment for him to say something sideways that either offends the ardent Jews or offends the Romans, and therefore one or the other can bring him up on charges. So they come to him and they say, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. So they're putting on these flatteries to him. They're talking about all of the ways in which he is he is true to what he says. He says the right things. He's true to God. All these kinds of things. And the flattery. This is from Ronald Kernighan's commentary on Mark. He says the flattery of verse 14 recalls the prophecies of Isaiah 2:2-4, and Micah 4:2-3, where the nations come to the Lord's temple and learn to walk in his ways, and God judges for them with impartiality. The language indicates that the real issue was Jesus's vision of the place of Gentiles in the temple. Remember, Pharisees didn't like Gentiles. They were ardent nationalists. They didn't want anybody impure in the temple. And therefore, so again, the fact that the Pharisees and the Herodians are together on this it's like oil and water almost. They're in it to get Jesus. And then my guess is as soon as this is done, then they go their separate ways because they hate each other. So they try to trap him in his own words, because if Jesus had said Caesar had a right to collect taxes in Judah, then the Herodians would have been satisfied, the collaborators with Rome, but the Pharisees would have denounced him to the crowd as a man who sided with their oppressors. So then the crowd would have jumped on his back and called for his head. If, on the other hand, he denied Rome's right of taxation, the Herodians would have jumped in, and they would have had everything they needed to denounce him to the Roman authorities in Judea. So this is the razor's edge that Jesus is walking, or they're trying to create for Jesus to walk on, and so the statement is that at the middle of verse 15, it says, Mark says, but knowing their hypocrisy, and that's Jesus knowing their hypocrisy, Jesus says to them, "Why are you putting me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me see it." So this is again in Kernighan. He says the Pharisees themselves. Here's their hypocrisy. The Pharisees themselves pay taxes to Caesar, and the Herodians could not have cared less about the way of God. So the Pharisees, their hypocrisy is that they're calling for Jesus to make a declaration about whether we should pay taxes or not, in the midst of them paying taxes regularly. Right. And the Herodians, who want Jesus to pay taxes or want the Jews to pay taxes, they don't care about God. So they're on both sides of this, and so he goes on to say that their hypocrisy suggests that the issue they brought was not the issue that was of fundamental importance. The more fundamental concern was about sovereignty. Who's really in charge? Is God in charge? Caesar in charge? And the Herodians and the Pharisees would have had very different opinions on that. And they, so then the brilliance of Jesus's response to them is that Jesus brings both God and Caesar into this moment. So he says, bring me a denarius and let me see it. And they bring it to him. And then he says to them, whose head is this and whose title? So on the denarius would have been, again, the image of Emperor Tiberius, and with the inscription, let's see, I think it's Caesar Augustus Tiberius, son of the divine Augustus, on one side, and then on the other side, it would have been Pontifex Maximus, which means high priest, great high priest, which, by the way, is also the term that's used for the Pope, but that's another story. Anyway, so So they say, so he asks, whose head is this and whose title it is? And he says, they say Caesar. They know whose image it is. They know what title it is. And so in that moment, then he says, give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and give to God the things that are God's. Now, what the Herodians and the Pharisees are trying to do is to make Jesus divide the world into two: God stuff and Caesar stuff. And the brilliance of this answer is that he's not actually doing that. It looks like he is, but he's not actually doing that, because the Jewish cosmos is that the earth is the Lord's and all there is, and all therein. Psalm 24, verse 1. And so, so there are the fact that there is a coin that is in Jesus's hand that has the image and the inscription of Caesar, to pay the Roman tax, is not making everything that it's not dividing the world into two. So if the emperor has this little coin and commands a tax to be paid, then he says, pay the tax, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But then he says, give to God the things that are God's. And if the earth is the Lord's and all there is, then everything is God's already. And so he has, so Jesus has navigated this this division that they've tried to create for him in a way that is, number one, not offensive enough to get him immediately killed, or drug into court, to be brought up on seditious charges or on blasphemy charges, in two different courts, that would be. But also then those who are around him have this mind-blowing moment. They're utterly amazed because he's those who are around them. Remember, this is Passover week, and so there are people everywhere that are watching this happen. And as he is navigating this moment, he sees, the people see that he's been backed. They want to back him into a corner, but he hasn't been stuck there. He actually just walks right past them, as he does. Is that in Mark 4? When he, hold on. There's another moment where they try to throw him off a cliff. No, that's not.
When he's in Nazareth, right?
Yeah. Maybe that's in. Is that in Luke? I think that's in Luke 4. Yeah, that's in Luke 4. Yeah, there you go. Luke 4, verse 29 says, they got up, drove him out of the town and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. So there you go. So it's this moment of him successfully navigating this paradox that they've tried to put him into. And he does so with ease. So this is William Lane's commentary on the Gospel of Mark, and he closes his comments on this particular section with, he says, there is gentle irony in Mark's closing comment that his adversaries marveled greatly at Jesus. It is appropriate that men who had come to ensnare Jesus through unguarded statement should sense the devastating effect of the authority displayed in his word. So William Lane puts the marveling at those who were there, the Herodians and the Pharisees. He puts it on them, that they witnessed this statement back from him, and while the irony is that they were trying to make him stumble, they're the ones that stumble. So, anyway, let's see. All right, and then I got one more. There was another comment or two and this is Eckhart Schnabel's commentary on the Gospel of Mark.
Good old Eckhart.
Yes, yes. Always good to have a good German name here. Let's see. So, all right. So he has after his comments on the text, he has a section around the theology of this passage. He says that more important than the political point is Jesus's theological assertion that God also has his rights, implying in the context of his proclamation of the kingdom of God, that what God demands is repentance in view of the coming of God's kingdom and faith in him as God's envoy. He goes on to say the kingdom that Jesus proclaimed would indeed supersede the current world empire, but the triumph of the kingdom of God would be inherited by the little flock, not by the men of violence. Peter and Paul similarly argued that Christians can be loyal both to Roman authorities and to God. See Romans 13, 1-7, and 1 Peter 2, 13-17. Jesus, he says, Jesus, Paul, and Peter do not speak of conflicts between the claims of God and the claims of the Roman emperor. Such conflicts arise when the sovereignty of the one true God is questioned and when civic authorities demand absolute obedience or worship. You can take a look at Daniel 3, 16-18, which is when Nebuchadnezzar sets up the golden statue and everybody has to bow down. Actually, well, he authorizes it, but it's his presidents that want it to be set up and worshiped to. Anyway, and then Acts 4, 19 and 5:29. He ends by saying that the divine dignity belongs only to the one true God and to Jesus, the Messiah, and the only true Son of God. This is the truth that Christians have been willing to die for, including Paul and Peter and Jesus himself. So, anyway, so still working on how I'll land the plane on all of this and make application for everyone. But that's a little bit more of the research behind this particular text. So again, there's just this odd pairing between the Pharisees and the Herodians that come and flatter Jesus, and the fact that Jesus understands that that they are, while they may say nice things, they don't actually mean it, and their own way of being, their own way of living, stands in direct contrast to the question that they're asking him to make a decision on. And then they're the ones that end up utterly amazed. So there you go. All right. That's what I got for today. Got questions?
Dean, I'd read something yesterday. Over the last couple of weeks, I guess I've been consumed with coinage or something, but
okay.
I had read something last week about the temple shekel, and I gave a little bit of information about that to my group that I was with last week. But then I was reading about the Roman taxes, and I don't know whether you know about this or not, or if this is correct or not, but I'd read yesterday that there were 3 different kinds of Roman taxes. There was one that if you had property, you had to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you had any kind of produce from your property, you had to give a portion of that to the Roman government, basically to feed the army that was occupying you in the case of Israel. And then you had a tax just for being alive.
Yeah.
Basically, you paid a coin or some amount of money just for the fact that you were breathing and you were in the Roman Empire. And apparently, at least this whoever that, and I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it again. Um, this commentator was saying that this was probably the most loathed tax of the Hebrews of the Israelite nation because it was just you had a coin with the face of a pagan on the front and calling him what did it say Holy Father or something
Uh,
on the back.
well, yeah, the high priest and yeah,
Yeah, and so and then on top of that you were taxing them just for the fact that they were still alive.
right.
Yeah. And so it seems like we forget that there's another group that's involved besides Jesus and the Herodians and the Pharisees, and that's all the just common folk standing around going, "Oh, this is going to be interesting. How does he answer this question?" I don't know. It just I don't know if you know anything about that or if you can verify that any of that's right or not. I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, that's correct. Yeah, there was there were the three taxes. There was, yes, the your alive tax. There was the your I think it was the way that I read it. It was phrased as your stationary property, so land, buildings, that kind of stuff. But then mobile property. So if you had a wagon or animals or something like that, you got taxed on that. So I guess produce would go in that as well. So yeah, that is correct.
Hmm.
So,
So
uh,
yeah, so I thought that was interesting that not only could you count on one group or the other to go running to whoever was in charge of their group, the
mm,
Pharisees, the high priest, or the Herodians to Pontius Pilate, but you had all the people standing there going, "Yeah, we hate paying this tax. What does he have to say about that?"
yeah, right. Which is the way that he phrases it about give to Caesar what Caesar's and give to God what is God's. There's the implication that he's saying yes, pay the taxes, um, um, and but also the implication that there's but again, like N.T. Wright said when we talked about last week, it's a bit of a subversion that throws back to the Maccabean revolt 200 years prior, where one of their battle cries was to give it back to the Gentiles the same as you got. And so there's he makes that N.T. Wright makes that play where to take what Jesus has said here and drops it back 200 years, where he's echoing that sort of rebellious kind of statement. And in terms of Jewish history, 200 years is nothing, because they remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, they'll go all the way back to the patriarchs, and recount all of Israelite history. You see it in the Psalms. Like I read Psalm 136 this morning, and it's a story of Israelite history, um, and so you see it over and over again, that those kinds of moments where the Jewish people rise up against the Gentiles, against those foreigners. You read it in Kings and Chronicles about the defense of Jerusalem. Read it in Nehemiah about rebuilding the wall and pushing back the forces that were trying to keep them from doing that. Um, and when you pay attention to the lineages of people in the Old Testament, you see the reason that uh, that names are important, and when it says this person son of this other person, and you can go and you can grab that name and you can figure out, go back and see who they're connected to. You can see if that's a person that did good, did right by the Lord, and you can see if that person did not do right by the Lord, and therefore that's why they're on this particular side of the ledger at that point. So, um, so yeah, um, so there's Jewish history is on the tip of their tongues, um, and um, and is deeply ingrained in their hearts. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, so 200 years back to the Maccabean revolt would be nothing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
very good.
Okay.
Okay, well, very good. Well, if any other questions come up, feel free to give me a shout. Appreciate you and your leadership, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
All right.
Thanks, Ray.
See you then.
I'll take care.
Okay. You too.